Hello, everyone. I am Carla Kopp. I am a board game designer, developer, and publisher. And this is the Chris Solis of Solis Game Studios. He is also a game designer. Solis Game Studios has done games such as Pocket Paragons, if I can talk, Frenemy Pastry Party. Chris also designed Temporal Odyssey and Terrene Odyssey. And he's part of Brieger Development. So, Chris, what else art do you do? Like, did I miss things?
That's basically for the most part. I used to work for Level 99 Games too and work on Exceed Fighting System. So yeah, after Level 99 Games, then at some point I was like, I'm going to make my own studio. So that Solis Game Studio, the first thing we did in-house was localized Frenemy Pastry Party. Pocket Paragons is the first true ground-up in-house game. And, there's tons of projects with Brieger as well. So it's like semi-brand of me working for John there. But yes, I'm involved in those projects too.
Can you tell us why you made your own game studio?
Yeah, the shortest version possible. I'll go into details. It's just like I just love games. Like no one, we get at a tabletop because we love games, right? When I first made my first tabletop game, it was like me as some guy in my garage. I'm going to do this, right? And I remember showing up to Gamma with my board game that I somehow manufactured, and then Aldo was like, "Who are you? You made this, right?" And then somehow that led to working for Level 99 Games. And then in a weird way, it's kind of like Solis Game Studios. Like, yeah, I kind of want to do that on my own again, but this time I have so much more experience after getting involved with the industry and whatnot. So, yeah, I want to do it as a job now that I understand it and whatnot. So that's why I opened my studio. I also get to work with my sister a lot, and that's a lot of fun. So
Oh, that is awesome. I would love to work with some sort of family in games. I'm just not that lucky. So today we're talking about specifically how to know when a game is ready to release, which is actually a very are games ever ready to release, or are we just tired of dealing with them? Well, you can
yeah,
give us more information on that.
you're right about games. There's a vibe about this game might never release, right? But I think there's two different checkpoints here. There's the version where like, hey, I don't want to release this yet because I can always add something to it. I can always improve it. And then there's the this shouldn't release because there's something fundamentally wrong with like its gameplay loop or its market appeal or people care. There's like two different things there. As a designer, we'll keep improving the game until we have to release it forever, right? But when do you know you should just not release a game, or when this game is ready to greenlight to actually producing itself? You know what I mean?
So, what are some signs that the game is like on the first one you talked about, where like you can always improve it, but there's nothing fundamentally wrong with it?
Um, I think the most critical. I'm going to go into a little bit of Pocket Paragons after this because this game has gone through like a billion phases. Um, the latest version we made, we just kind of like, yeah, let's make this new version, and then like, God, it's hard to say. It's like it just worked. It's like shopping for a new shirt. You're like, I like the shirt too, but no, I have to have that one, right? It clicked, and at first it was kind of hard to realize. Like we had to ask ourselves, like, why is this one working with others and whatnot. Um, it was kind of like the feedback we were getting was not just good, but it was unique to like, hey, I kind of want this in the game because I like the game that much. It's like the players are like almost in a way expanding it. They're like, I want to see more content like this. We had some people on the Discord make like custom characters and stuff. Like they are in. It's a different vibe than yeah, I kind of liked it. I might play again. Like they may have had a good time, but it's missing a hook. So once the hook happened, then we're like, yeah, we should actually publish this thing. And I think that's really a marriage of like the core mechanic and the length of the game. At least that's what I felt like about Pocket Paragons. So I guess I'll talk about the series a little bit. Designer Brian McKay, been working on this for like 7 years, right? And he might be asking like, oh, the Pocket Paragons is like a micro game, right? Like how can it take it 7 years? Because it took forever to realize that the feedback loop we wanted and the hook of the game are like they were always disjointed until we got to the Pocket version. right? So, the game was a larger, more complex game, and then all the mechanics on top of it were like fluff that wasn't really working, you know.
Mhm.
And we finally trimmed it down to its beautiful core, and that's what really made it hit.
So let's talk about like how you like got it down to the core, because I think that's one of the major problems that most designers have is they have all these ideas and you put all the ideas in and you have just a mess of things like, but finding that core is so hard. So how did you actually find the core with Pocket Paragons?
Yeah. So let me preamble with one of the versions of Paragons was actually a mech game, right? Where you put this mat on the board and two players play as one mech and you play your ability cards. It's basically Pocket Paragons as it is now, right? Against another mech. And the game was sick and we really liked it. But then it was that bubble like, hey, like it's just there's something off, right? And like I guess there's a reality where I hit publish on that and could have been like lukewarm happy about it. I feel like in order to get to that core, I had to have the audacity to be like, let's put our child down. It's so hard. It's so personal that it's hard to distance yourself. Some people do this by like shelving a design for a couple months, right? I like to do it by showing different people and seeing how they still respond. Um, how do you know when to emotionally detach from designs you can actually evaluate it? And that's what made me realize that like this mech game, even though there's cool things in there, was not in sync with the core gameplay loop that is Pocket Paragons now. Um, Once I thought to myself, hey, we should take this out. Isn't that the reason we made the game? Then this is a different project, right? So that's kind of that to us is the identifying. It's funny because Brian came out one day and he's like, I made a quick new version of Pocket Paragons. You want to play it real quick? We just like he just made it up like instantly, and it just worked. You know,
Yeah.
It just happened one day. So,
Well, that's like I can completely understand that because like, well, it probably didn't just happen. It was probably like all those years of you playing it and like all the playtesting feedback coming together, where it was just like, oh right, yeah, this is obvious in this moment, but like you had to go through all that playtesting feedback and iteration until your brain was just like, oh yeah, this is it.
yeah, totally, yeah. You're right. It felt like an instant thing at the moment, but it was the preamble of like years of this, And not only that, but like growing as a designer and thinking about like it as a product, which is a big deal for this game too. So yeah, I agree.
So 7 years is a long time. How did you motivate yourself to like stay on the same game for that long?
um, I think that's more about Brian's motivation. I think what happened there is, I'm sure he went through dips where he was like done, right? I'm not going to speak for him exactly, but on my end, as somebody that could make the game, I always kept that door open, right? Like, hey, let's make a game. Didn't exactly happen. Show me another version. You kept that communication going at all times. It was never like, hey, this game's not working. I'm going to close the door. And I think that availability was, it must have helped to be like, okay, let me try again, as opposed to the ship has sailed, right?
Yeah.
So being available and consistent, that's what I did as a publisher for looking at a design consistently, right? I might say no a million times, but it's still possible. How did Brian continue to motivate himself? You have to bring him on the show sometime and ask him.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Because I'm also a publisher. So like I don't think I specifically like keep that door open. I should probably do that more often where like I say no, but like adding in the whole like it's not good yet, but it could be good in the future. Like I think that's a really good thing for you to do because then you foster relationships and hope well in this case it did pan out and it's funded on Kickstarter right now, right?
Yeah, it's funded. And you have to think though, even if it didn't work out and you didn't publish your game and you giving that back to this designer is like valuable to them, they're going to remember that, so why not give something a little back?
So that is another great point where like even if like you work on a game with somebody for a long time and nothing happens with it, you at least have that relationship, you've both learned, and hopefully you can do something in the future.
Totally.
So, can you tell us about a time where you changed your mind about a game that was ready to release, if this has ever happened?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So this is going back to like the Temporal Odyssey days, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just finished Terrene Odyssey, and I was making a smaller drafting version of it. Same game mechanic, but like a drafting pool, and we're going to do a Kickstarter with level 99 associated with it, and it was going to be a thing. But I mean, like 4 days before the Kickstarter, Brad from level 99 was like, I don't think we should do this. Right? And at the time, I was like really upset. I'm like, why? Right? But then later it sunk in. I'm like, he's right. Like we just went through the fact list. Like I would have never initiated that because it was my baby, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it was incomplete. It was a mod. It wasn't a new game, right? Mm-hmm. And after that got put down, then we got the remains of that and eventually made Temporal Odyssey, And I kind of feel like there was definitely a point there where it could have been easy to give up and be like, it's over, right? But when I looked at the whole project and thought about what pieces were actually interesting, and in my mind, resetting that game to ground zero, then from that, I was able to make Temporal Odyssey ground up. And eventually, that worked in our partnership. Level 99 published that at some point.
So one of the things I thought was really cool that you said there, looking at the parts that were actually interesting, like being able to differentiate those parts. Do you have any tips for designers that are trying to do that, like finding the cool parts to their game if they don't know exactly what those are?
Yeah. I think that might change as you're going through this journey quite often, right? Like I think about like when I first made that drafting mod for Terrene Odyssey, what was interesting? What's actually interesting in Temporal, like not the same, right? When are you ready to reverse engineer a game? Playtesters, you can ask them. I think it's really hard to see. It's really only a matter of time and exposure. Could I have done it myself? No. I think I needed to have the right community to help me understand. What did you like about this game? What's the most interesting? I think that the answer here is you need a community. You can't just be on your own little bubble. I'm always going to like what I created, even if it's bad. So, right? So,
yeah, I definitely agree with that. Like, well, and it's just so fascinating because, like, I know why I design the games that I do, and I know why I think that they're cool. But like putting them in front of other people and just having them like to even see if like they think it's as thematic as I do, because like my brain works in a very certain way and other people's don't. So like what is thematic to me might be completely abstract to somebody else. And that whole part about like you really need the community to be there to be like, oh yeah, this is really cool, or like this part is just overly complicated just because you're a game designer and you make things overly complicated at this point just for fun. So yeah, I definitely use the community to try to identify like all those things that like I might like, but do regular people like these things?
Yeah, I think I like what you said about designing for yourself. Like I'm gonna make this overcomplicated beast, and it's like I want to make something entertaining. The first thing that I'm gonna try to make entertain is myself, right? And that might not be true for other people because of bandwidth, right? It's so easy to think about, how can I say this, like what I already know as base level, and then I teach myself on top of that, right? But a new player might not understand something like what's a drafting game, or like attacking with a card, or even the concept of having a hand. And we have to start asking our questions like, what is the audience for my game, and actually test with that group to see if it even works, if you change the scope of the game or whatnot, right?
Yeah.
That happened in Pocket Paragons. One of the earlier versions of the game, you would have 3 characters and a bunch of cards in your hand. You would assign them to the characters and it reveals what happened. And it was like hyper convoluted, right? We thought it was sick, but people were spending too much time digesting the rules for what the actual interaction of the game was. So that's why that one got put down. You know,
Mhm.
who you're designing for is a critical question.
So, what's a good way to like know or like try to decide what the audience of your game is or what you want them to be?
The way we do it is like we do start with what we like first, right? Then at some point we will ask, okay, who's this game actually for? And once we focus that down, then we might change the scope of the game or the complexity of the game and kind of sway it in that direction back and forth. In Pocket Paragons, we pulled it way back. Like we wanted to make sure the game is accessible to like, if somebody knows what a basic card game is, they can play this game, right?
Mhm.
And you know that changed the complexity of the cards and the game and how much stuff is on the table and whatnot. So it is a choice. Like we could have gone the mech way and killed the core mechanic and made just a completely different product. Who are the people playing your games? Who is your audience? Those are publisher questions. You know, if you're a game designer and you give your game to a publisher, they're gonna choose what audience they already have. So I think it's just a choice. You know, just don't do both. The games are for specific audiences, and make sure you know that your game has an audience.
I think that's really good. Like, don't try to like appeal to everyone because like you have an audience, so figure out who they are and appeal to them. And you also brought up something like I talk a lot about game accessibility, but one thing you mentioned that I don't normally talk about was the amount of stuff on the table, which is really cool because like like a new gamer might come in and see like everything on the table and just be very intimidated. But if there's like a small subset of things on the table, like how many cards are usually on the table for Pocket Paragons? Like,
0. Yeah, it's all in your hand. I guess like it depends when something is exhausted.
mm-hmm.
And the game is designed to be played while standing up in line.
Oh, that's nice.
So yeah,
So that is super accessible.
Yeah, we got a little dial. You can hold it or put it in your pocket. But the math in the game is so simple that some players are more than likely just, remember it.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, the length of the game and what's interesting about it was as little as possible. If you play the tournament mode, I guess you'll put your exhausted cards and your character card and your dial down. So that's 3 zones that are all very distinct. Everyone knows what a discard is. The little dial combines 2 numbers into 1 asset, and your character card is just a reminder sheet. So,
Oh, that is great. Ben had a question. How do you know when a game is worth publishing? Like, what do you think about designing several prototypes and picking what you think has the best chance of success versus picking an idea you think could work and committing to that?
Yeah, I feel like for that question, I would put on my publisher hat and try to distance myself from, like, if I think a design is cool, I would start with the audience. Right now I'm thinking about after Pastry Party, what kind of game would that audience that I collected like, right? So that pregates like the bandwidth of the game, the style of the game, and the demographic of the game. What ideas do I want to fit into that audience? It's a little disjointed from like, is the game good when I'm going through that process at that point in time? I do have to think of it as a business and just go full marketing mode. And then from there, see what's actually worthy product. So, how flexible are you in your design? Is your game, does it have to be about alien marines? I don't know. Like, that's going to change who's going to publish it, right? Or what complexity is expected.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea because, like not thinking about how good a game is because, like, if you work on a game, you can make any game better. But if you could work forever on a game that has like such a small audience that it's not worth it. Like, so going after the game that has like a really good audience and then making that one like as good as you can, like that's awesome. Like,
Yeah, you could have the greatest design and just like not market it or let people know about it correctly and miss audience it and just let it die. It's just sad, you know. Uh, I'm sure we've all played a game like that that just didn't feel like its theme, you know. Like I need to make sure I'm not pigeonholing myself into a theme or an audience. Like, where do you want to start? Where do you want to work to? And make sure that they are married by the end.
mm-hmm. Yeah, that is definitely something I've been struggling with lately. Actually, is the marrying the theme with the audience.
Mm-hmm.
We've played several of my games, and I normally make games about cute, cuddly animals. I don't know why. That's just
Okay.
that inspires me. But then I make games like I have a game called Puffins Love Muffins, and it's super really heavy.
Okay.
But that like I've been like, so what do I do with this? Because to me it's like super thematic. It was a game about puffins in Maine collecting souvenirs. But it's really heavy, and anyone that would see like, oh, puffins love muffins, they would not assume heavy Euro game. They'd assume like party game.
Uh-huh.
Basically what I've been saying. So how do you feel about things like that? Would you retheme or just put it on the shelf?
Is that game published or?
No, not yet.
Oh,
It is
okay.
just a game I'm making because I love puffins and muffins and Maine, I guess.
My first question would be like, do you think your existing audience would be receptive to a heavier game, right? And if the answer is yes, and enough people, then I would just do it because I want to. But I couldn't without that knowledge, because that's like starting at ground zero. You know, like you said, there's a mismatch there. But if your audience is ready for a thicker game, maybe you already have those people that would understand and accept that idea. You know,
Mhm.
like similarly, I think of a ridiculous game idea called uh, uh, like we make fun of this all the time here. We call it like roll and move legacy, right? A game that starts off as a roll and move game, but after one round, you open a box and set up a new component, and then it gets more and more complex until like by turn 30, you're playing like a 4x, you know, and it's just like this power creep joke, right? But then every once in a while, somebody we're hanging out with would be like, not that we'd be hanging out physically for a while, would be like, that sounds sick. I would totally play that, right? Like, who is that person? You know, they exist, but because it's so specific, if I were to ever make something like that, I would make sure that that audience is like on my mailing list and honed in before I consider something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, if World of Legacy ever comes out, then I did that. So,
I mean, I get really excited about that to see like, oh yeah, like I would love when it like just crank up the complexity. By the end, you're just like doing crazy stuff. But I think that audience is like all these game designers that are like, I need to see something new and different, and that's what I like. Like I don't like good things. I like different things.
okay, yeah, that makes sense. I think another person that would like a game like that are people that like to open stuff. Like you're playing a legacy game. Like, I want to open this box and learn something. And ironically, it's like really good usability because you're teaching the game as you're playing it. You know, like that's the core of that game. Like, who would like that? But yeah.
I mean, yeah, like I love when you can open a game and just play it out of the box and like learn as you go. And that sounds like that, except like on steroids, probably.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's easier for video games, right? They have like good tutorials uh, and introduce mechanics over time. Why don't board games do that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah.
I think, well, the legacy games are the only ones I've really seen that in. Um, but a lot of legacy games have been really, really good. Well, some of them have been bad too. I guess I've only really enjoyed Pandemic Legacy.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, it's definitely like a genre that probably needs more games in it.
Yeah, I mean, even then, I think that we can add usability to non-legacy games, like simple things. Like I know Breeze's Aegis game has like these 4 packs, and the first pack is like your first game, and then on your second game you open this. There's no stickers, there's no actual legacy components, but it's like a rolling complexity. So by the time you get to game 5, you can have all the things on the table without being like overwhelmed. Like, can we do that to smaller scope games? I don't know. I think that's something for designers to think about.
Yeah, I'm like, well, like, it's getting my design brain going. Like, how do we do this? Like, I've seen different games. Like, they usually have it in like a 2-step or maybe a 3-step version where, oh, there's the beginner game that's maybe shorter, or you take out cards, and then there's like I add in these cards for a more complex game. But having that be a little more than just beginning and end state, I think that would be really cool.
Yeah, I think about that, and I think that's you said something that made me feel like taking away cards like that feels bad. You don't want players to feel like they're playing the nerfed version. You know, shuffle all that in. I'm playing this game right now, right? Um, Maybe it only works for games that really stack mechanics on top of each other like super hard, so they can feel like an escalating thing. I don't know. These are questions that I'm sure board game designers will tackle at some point.
Yeah, and I definitely like with the whole like taking cards out. I've thought about that, but it works like you say, where like some people will be like, "Hey, I'm a gamer. I can handle it all," and then they put in all of it, and then they're like, "This is too complex."
Oh no, yeah.
And so you have to like really do the line of like not making people feel bad. Like you want them to feel like they're really clever and smart, even if they are playing kind of like the beginner version, which is it's a really fine line to walk.
Yeah. So like, yeah, I think about. So this is like a hyper tangent, but I'll go back to like scaling complexity in a minute. So I've been playing like Hades. Have you played Hades?
I'm not.
Okay, so that's a roguelike game, a computer game, and you're trying to escape hell. You go through the game, you die. If you get out, you win, right? And the next time you go through it, even though it's like an arcade experience, the narrative is different, and they'll throw in a mechanic every single time you do it. And every time I thought to myself, they're going to stop adding mechanics, they haven't, even after I beat the game, right? Just more mechanics and more story. It feels like almost indefinite. I played it like 50 times already, right? And if I just jumped in, like, I don't know, like, it's too much, you know? They really made sure you understand it and whatnot. So in a weird way, that's kind of like we're talking about with like stacking legacy mechanics. They didn't give me an opportunity to feel like, nah, I'm going to play the hard mode, right?
Mm-hmm.
How can we bring those kind of ideas to board games? And maybe baking it in with narrative is the answer. You know, I guess that's more legacy-ish, but you know, if your Euro game could have like a 3-beat story across 3 games, maybe that's light enough to get people to play it the right way.
Yeah. Like I think that's a really cool idea. Like it's kind of what Charterstone did, but different. Because like Charterstone, I feel like you had to play the game like 10 or 20 times, but then you got a game that you could just play all the time and it didn't change. But doing like the micro version of that where you play like 3 to 5 times and keep like adding things until you get to the ending board where you could just play it all the time and you know all the things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's really unexplored space. So anyways, yeah, that's like a huge tangent from dev, but you know, point being is that usability and accessibility is something that we're always thinking about in dev.
So I'm really passionate about like usability and accessibility too. Like, is there something like that you've recently found to make games more accessible or usable?
Let's see. When we make our prototypes, I guess it kind of goes into like when do you make layout questions, right? You know, we think about like placement of icons and like font size stuff like that, like immediately. Like it is, to me, it is fundamentally part of the game design. having a card where it's just like a wall of text, and I don't do that literally. I can't, right? So I think about where information is and how people are going to find it and approach it. Prototype one. It just is part of the game design for me. I'm willing to change my game design to enhance usability. That's a hot take. Some people would rather not, right? They might feel like they're nerfing their game, but I want more people to play these games, and I don't think it's an actual thing to feel like accessibility is blocking a more complex, rich experience. It might be harder to get there, but I think you can have the same experience with that approach. Again, just more work. So yeah. Things that I've learned that are specific. Man, it's just funny how there's always something that comes up. I don't have a specific example right now, though.
Okay. But yeah, I definitely agree with that. Like, well, and also it makes the whole concept of weight to be really weird because you can have two games that are very similar, but if one is a lot more accessible, then their weights are completely different. Like accessibility can like bring down the cognitive load a lot. One of the games I like to bring up for this is Fort by Leader Games. Have you played it?
Oh, yeah, it's great. Yeah.
Yeah. So I played the game before it, the one with the letters like SPQF, or I don't know. The name is not accessible because I can never remember it. So Fort, I could just play and it was thematic and great and we all understood it and just went all in. But the game that came before it, it had like graphic design that my brain just did not understand. And I was just struggling with the graphic design on that like the entire game. Like, and it was one of the only games where like halfway through I was just like, nah, I'm good at this point. Like I don't get it. Like I need to do something else. But like the only real difference in those two games is like the accessibility and usability of all of it. Well, and like better art and things. But yeah, it's really different.
People only have so much bandwidth, and I want people to use that bandwidth playing the game and like in this case, against an opponent because Pocket Paragons is a head-to-head game, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're spending so much time thinking about like board state and whatnot, and you never get to think about the player's actions, that's probably a big reason the larger Paragon games didn't work. So again, usability is critical.
So how do you go about like testing to make sure that your game is usable?
I mean, other than playing as many times as possible and infinite revisions, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think about how did we get there. In prototyping, we make adjustments to card layout and wording. We have a style guide. Icons are always in the same place and the same colors. All the colors are distinct. All the shapes, silhouettes are distinct. So if you were to glance at them, you would know, right? Font sizes, we made it consistent. These are all things that you should never have to think about as a player, right? You shouldn't have to think about like, oh, why is this icon in a different place? You won't think that. You'll just look, won't find it, and like use an extra thought to find it. I can spare you one thought, right? So what can I make it consistent in the language of my game? Also with the way the words, the wording of the game, the way things are said and written, there's a guide for that too. So it's consistent. And once you know how the game expects you to process information, you can continue to process information that way. Have you ever played a game where you get another card and you're like, can't read it? Then you read it again, like, okay, I get it. It's not that it's not English. It's that you're already thinking something else, right? Yeah. To avoid situations like that. But you got to be careful of like our bubble too. We have our people that we play. At what point does everyone know the game well enough to not catch usability issues anymore? You just got to get out there. We can't, we're not doing conventions for a long time, which is rough, but we've been using TTS. We put the whole game on there and let people play. We sent out a media kit and just shotgun that out into the wild, and see what people say. Honestly, the previews from reviewers helped a lot. People would say certain things and be like, "Okay, I know what to change in the rulebook now," right? To make that more consistent. Like it would have just never been caught if I didn't do a preview version. Even that's still part of the process. Even though the game is locked in terms of like design and goals, like there's always little things you can improve along the way. Up, down, and previews. Yeah, so.
Yeah. I think that's the hardest part is actually like saying like, oh, okay, it's the rule book is done for sure. Like this is the final version. Like in some of the games I've published, I've had a final version of the rule book maybe 10 times because like you keep adding more things, and each edit at a certain point is really dangerous because then it's like, well, if I fix one typo, how many typos am I adding in the fixing of it? So how do you like make sure like that the ending rulebook is really good and final?
The most critical thing is I put that rulebook on the internet as fast as possible. Just more exposure, like people discovering it right now, reviewers discovering it right now. Everyone that's played Pocket Paragons outside of my house had to read that rulebook. And, it led to some discrepancies we had to iron out that to me was obvious, but it's not because I've seen it 1,000 times. And it just slowly starts to dwindle until there's no more. There's probably still something in there. I don't know what it is. Rulebook's never done, really. Who knows what somebody might come up with tomorrow, right? Luckily for me, Pocket Paragons is simple enough where it feels pretty complete, but a rulebook is never done, quite honestly. Like even the media kit came with a QR code because we're changing it so often, right? So like the rulebook is a QR code, and then like after the game releases, if we have an expansion, there'll be a new rulebook, maybe a new mechanic that we have to revise. It's endless. So I don't know what to say. We have to use the internet to leverage this as hard as possible. Yeah.
So how do you get people on the internet to actually look at your rule book and look at your game and like find the errors? Well, and tell you about them. I guess like they have to go through a series of steps, and the telling you about them is one of the most important things.
So we have the fan site and the media site. Let's talk about the media site first. We actually made a small version of the game, physical, right? And sent it to anyone who wanted it, as long as they're media, right? And on the media landing page, they have everything they need to write articles. There's also a feedback section. So if if they decided to play it and review it and they get stuck, they could just ask me directly, and I use that data to see where people would get stuck. So that was just like low key a way to gather more feedback. In our community portal, we just make sure it's accessible. People will pop in there. We try to chat with people here and there. See where they're more willing to bring up a question, as opposed to we're not probing them directly for feedback. We would do that in design sessions. We're like, hey, you want to play this game? Read the rule book and we'll watch. We do that separately. So I'm pretty confident in our smaller pods. We get most of the stuff in there. But it's like the really extreme stuff that people will actually reach out to you. So you want to make sure that you're as accessible as possible.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any tips on how to create like this fan portal of people that just love your games enough to tell you about them?
People like free stuff. And think about an actionable. For us, it's join our Discord. Your Discord's popping. Right? There's a lot of people in there. It's great. So this, right? The action to everything we say is join our Discord. Come here. Please come here. Hang out with us. There are memes there. Come, right? And once we're there, we just foster the community as best as possible. So I don't have any particular thing there other than have one actionable. We try not to spread it out too much. Like our Facebook page exists, but I don't tell people to follow it. If you follow it, sweet. I don't care. But if you're in the Discord, you're in one place, and we can engage you as a community. It's hard for a content creator of my size to manage so many different sites. So I don't want to do a half-assed job on different sites. This is where it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree with that because at one time, like, I had a Facebook group, I have the Discord, I had a Reddit, I was doing Twitter and the Facebook page. And if you try to do everything, you're not going to do anything well. But yeah, with just focusing on Discord, it's so much fun, and like you actually building a community is nice. So yeah, I fully support the whole like do one thing well, send people to one place, and hopefully it all just works out.
Yeah. Also about the free stuff bit. We have a mailing list sign up where you can just print out a copy of Pocket Paragons, right? So if you want to try it for free, you just can. And then from there, if you liked it, you'll get an email saying, hey, by the way, we hang out here. And then you get the action. And if you don't, that's fine. Thanks for trying it out, right? But people like free stuff, so we like to give you free stuff. Play Pocket Paragons. Right? So, yeah, even at cons when we're doing them for level 99 games, we would give out demo decks of like a complete game. And we went through thousands. It was so successful. It was ridiculous. So, we can't because of, COVID, not that we're going to cons anytime soon, but when that life returns, we'll probably do the same for Pocket Paragons.
Yeah, like I've heard you talk about like giving out the free games before, and that sounds like crazy because you had to actually like buy all those games. Did you get them printed at like somewhere special or just like the normal places like Game Crafter?
In the case of level 99 games, it was part of the manufacturing process. They're from the factory, complete. We made a bunch of demo stuff for Pocket Paragons preemptively, even though it's going to be sitting in my garage for like a year, right? Also from the original print run of the game. So the marketing strategy is baked into the experience we want people to have from the game itself. Like even if, God forbid that cons just never exist again, right? Maybe we'll mail them out or whatnot, but we want people to get, a bite-sized version of the game and discover us. So that's how important it is to give away free stuff for us, right? Just like print run 1, we're making that many duplicates. So.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense because you are now funded on Kickstarter and it's doing pretty well. So, I mean, it worked. You know what you're doing.
Yeah. Thank you. I hope so. Yeah.
At what point in a game's design do you decide that the game is good enough to start getting the illustration and graphic design done for it?
So this is a hot take. I do it this way. I'm sure most people don't, but I create a vertical slice of the game. So I'll take the time to make I do some graphic design. So I'll do the layout Chris Solis edition, which we pretty good, but not the final version. I'm going to hire a real professional for it, right? And then I'll probably contract like 2 to 3 pieces of art because I want the style and feel to be clear immediately to my team and to my early play testers. So I create that vertical slice. Like, here's what the card's going to look like, You should generally not buy art until as late as possible. At least that's probably the safest thing because your theme might change. Your art direction might change. You might hate the game later. Publishers don't want art on top of that, right? So that's assuming you self-publish. Don't buy more than a piece or 2. Buy never, right? You can always just commission the entirety of a game's art, like in one chunk, when you get to this is the greenlit time, right? For me, marrying the theme and the characters is important, which is why I do the vertical slice thing. That's a little different because a lot of my games are like IP driven. I plan to use the same characters over and over. So I make sure that there's a character development process there, which is why I do the vertical slice. So don't do that unless you're doing something IP driven. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I do like the idea of like just getting like one card made, because like the art for one card can't, like, it's not all that expensive. So you should be able to like afford one just to like see how it would look and give people an idea.
Yeah, exactly. It's if the design gets canceled completely, you aren't ruined, right? Like, how much art is in your games? Like, Terrene Odyssey was like $30,000 art. Can you imagine? I just didn't make that game. So, yeah. Also, never again. But like, I'd be more specific about art now. So.
So, do you have any like things that you've specifically learned from getting games to that done stage?
I guess like if you're at the done stage and then you keep thinking, but wait, let me add something, you are not at the done stage and you should stop before you make some mistakes. You know, when you're actually at the done stage, like you're thinking more about marketing it and getting people to understand it. At least it's the way I feel about it. That might be kind of a mixed answer because of the different hats I wear. When I get to that point, I'm not thinking about dev or the balance at that particular time. I have put a pin in it, and I focused on getting people to understand what this game is. You know, after that step, I'll go back and polish it, of course, right? But I'm not adding mechanics or additional experiences. I feel like if I feel like I need to add additional experiences in a heavy way, that is a fail state. So, you know, make sure your experience is locked. I think you'll know. I think you'll know, but maybe some people just never stop, right? So, if you're never, yeah, if you're the designer who says their game is never done, I hope that's in the form of content, like maybe more cards or characters, as opposed to mechanics. I think that's the distinct difference there between continuing to grow your game and not knowing your game is.
Yes, I definitely agree with that. Like, I'm one of those designers where I like have created expansions for games that aren't done yet, like where I'll have like so many ideas and I'll be like, well, this is a good idea for some time, so it's going to go into an expansion box just to like get it out of my head. But like, I try to work on the base game. But almost every game I've ever made, I have like some sort of mini expansion or expansion, like that is just done because the content just keeps coming. Like, it's so easy just to add like another 10 or 20 or 50 cards if you get really bored.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing though. It sounds to me like you know if you have mechanics in those expansions, which are extra layers to the core experience, right? So that's great. You know, you're not putting it into the core and blending it some more. That distinction is great.
So, is there anything you wish you knew when you started working in board games?
Don't buy art. Don't buy art. I know I said this vertical slice thing, but I also learned that lesson at a heavy cost. So don't buy more. Don't buy a lot of art. You know, your focus on your layout, your usability before graphic design or art. I would say that. We all have an idea of like a world. You know, you're building board games. You're creative. Don't get caught up in that early on. And don't have it cost you money you don't have. So.
Okay.
Oh, one more thing. Learn InDesign. Right? Learn InDesign and data merge. Like, I made my first game in Photoshop like a crazy person, and never again. You know, after some YouTube videos, I was like, "What have I been doing?" Right? So, if you're intimidated by those kind of programs, I advise you to not be, and look into it, and you'll save yourself hours. Yeah. So.
I fully support that thing too, because like at this point, like I love being able just to go like and update a prototype and have the update be just changing a spreadsheet, which takes, I don't know, 5 minutes, and then pushing like redo to like generate everything, and then it's done, instead of like actually changing each individual card. Like, I've also done that the hard way, and that is how you make errors.
Yeah, it's how you make errors. And I understand it can be pretty intimidating. It is 100% worth the 10 to 20 hours it will take you to learn design. So yeah.
So we've talked about Pocket Paragons a little bit already, but could you tell us a little bit more about it and how you knew to make it into the set of the 4 different games?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a story here. When we decided to make it a set of 4 games, it's because the game functioned best in social spaces that we don't have anymore, right? We wanted it was designed to be a convention game. Like, hey, what if you went to this booth and got a box of Pocket Paragons, and then this booth, and you could fight, or you could play in line. So we actually designed the game to be a convention game, and then, that became not a thing anymore. That being said, we still wanted to make it IP driven and get a sensation of mixing boxes. So we made 4 boxes anyways. It still functions the same way, even though maybe if we didn't have an idea of it being a convention game, maybe we made less boxes. But we're very excited to work with the different IPs and the different art styles, and getting to play with them together still feels really good. So it is kind of an artifact, but I'm happy that it's happening, and I hope we can make more later with the success of the Kickstarter.
I mean, it sounds really cool. Like, I haven't really heard about convention games like being like a genre, but I love it now that I hear about it.
Yeah, it's just like it's fun to meet people and like, just like, hey, you play that? Yes, I do. I got my free demo deck at this thing. This guy over here has a different free demo deck, right? So stuff like that. But yeah, that's unfortunately not happening. But that is why it ended up being 4 boxes.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense. Well, and we'll have conventions again in probably a year. Yeah.
I am not that optimistic, but I will see. We'll see.
I have to think about in a year, because if I think we might never have conventions, I might just give up.
No,
that would just be too sad. No, can't give up. It'll happen. Just it's always a year away.
Always a year away. Okay.
So it's getting to the end of the hour. Do you have any final thoughts?
Not really. It was fun to talk to you about Dev. Hopefully I didn't talk too much. But yeah, this was a lot of fun.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Where can people find you after this?
The best place to find me is Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter. It's CGCFox. I'll put it here in the chat. And then Twitter. I talk about all kinds of stuff, and game design and video games and whatnot. And
I hear you have a Discord too, right?
I do have a Discord, even though I just told you that actually. No, let me say that. Yeah, I do. I love my Discord. Here's the Discord link.
Okay. So thank you so much for being here. And I hope everyone has a great weekend. If you ever want to talk more about game design or see the next game design live chat, we do this every Sunday at 2 p.m. And I also have a Discord. It's at weirddraftgames.com/discord. So have a great weekend, everyone. And thank you so much for being here, Chris.
Thank you for having me.